This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, co-founder and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, Jamie Bogner. This is episode 203, and I am sitting here live at the Firestone Walker Propagator Brewery in Venice, California. And across from me is Sam Tierney, Brewhouse Propagator Brewery Manager. Welcome to the podcast, Sam.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm excited to be here.
Wanted to have this conversation with Sam since he penned an article in our June-July lager issue on busting lager myths. It was fun to have that in the magazine. But Sam is doing R&D like crazy down here for Firestone Walker and brewing on a beautiful small-scale Casper Schultz fully automated system and one of the most beautiful small brewery setups that I have seen in North America. And so, yes, you've got some fantastic tools at your disposal here at the Propagator. We're going to talk about hazy IPA just because, hey, we can, and it's a subject actually I haven't talked about much so far this year. Mind Haze is certainly blowing up for Firestone Walker, and we're going to talk about some of the innovation process behind that. We're going to talk about some of the ways that Firestone Walker relates to hops. I imagine we're probably going to talk a little bit about lager brewing in there too, just because it's something that it's personal passion. Of course, we've just been in our pre-interview here talking about some exciting kind of stuff, and I think it'd be fun to delve into that. And then we're just going to cover the general process of innovation for Firestone Walker and how these new beers get made and scaled up for such a large scale size brewery like Firestone Walker. It's going to be fun. Before we do that, reminder: our CBC party is September 9th, 3 to 5 p.m. Thursday afternoon. Bierstadt Lager House. Come on by. The Bierstadt beers are on us, and it would be fantastic to see all of you all. G&D Chillers is born in the Pacific Northwest from a lot of hard work and a singular goal: become the best damn chiller company in the world. Like you, G&D never settles. They're relentless and strive to be better every single day because they take pride in the work they do. They're craftsmen who know that good enough just won't cut it. Visit G&D Chillers at CBC booth 3011, 3011, or reach out directly at gdchillers.com. This episode is also brought to you by BSG Hop Solutions. Meet the latest in the BSG Hop Solutions portfolio: sativa, strong expressions of stone fruit, floral, and resinous pine flavors and aromas define this blend, crafted specifically for use in hazy IPAs and other hop-forward beers. Sativa is ideal for aroma, whirlpool, and dry hop additions to hazy and juicy IPAs or for any other hoppy styles where a combination of citrus, tropical fruit, and pine aromatics are desired. Go to bsgcraftbrewing.com to learn more or call 1-800-374-2739. So, Sam, let's talk about your arc through brewing. Catch me up on your history and what that looks like and the steps of your professional career has taken to get you right here at the Propagator Brewhouse in Venice.
I think I had a little bit of a different kind of trajectory initially than a lot of brewers do. I kind of got into being a beer geek really hardcore right off the bat when I was really young. I was 20 years old, and I had just kind of gotten interested in beer. I was going to UC Santa Barbara, just north of here, and I just started trying different beers and was like, oh, beer isn't just this gross light thing. We were used to the real low budget stuff, that you would drink in college. And I tried some other things, DVA was actually one of them from Firestone at the time. Beers like Fat Tire or Pyramid or Widmer, the
Sure.
kind of mid-aughts stuff that was really common in this area. And then I studied abroad in Sweden that fall. And that was 2007. And, Sweden has this alcohol monopoly where you buy all the beer. Right, and it actually has a really good beer selection. And I kind of was like, wow, I don't really know any of these are. I guess I'll just start trying random things. I went to a bar with a friend. I went over there with a few friends from UC Santa Barbara. And there was this beer that he told me to get called Chimay. And I was like, what is this? And he's like, it's made by monks in Belgium. You got to try it. And then my mind was blown. I had the flavors. It was incredible. So I went online and I looked it up, and that led me to rate beer, beer advocate, all kinds of different stuff. So I started kind of diving into researching beer. I was just so fascinated by it and everything. And I hit it really hard. I went on a few trips over in Europe too. So we went to Oktoberfest a couple weeks after that and got that whole experience going through Germany. And I was thinking, if I'm going to travel around, I should log these. So I actually started rating the beers on Rate Beer and Beer Advocate too.
Yeah.
Got in that whole thing. And trying those beers was great. I still didn't really have a very good palate at all, and was just learning about it, just trying to figure out what I liked. I was like, hefeweizens are great. I like that, but maybe not by the liter. At Oktoberfest, maybe stick with the fest beer and then drink the half out of the regular glass or whatever. But so after that, we went to Amsterdam, and by then I was like, okay, Westvletteren's the number one rated beer in the world. I got to find it. So I found a place I could get it. So this was all within the first like 2 or 3 months of really like being aware of craft beer. I was just like off the deep end, trying to figure it all out. And then I had actually homebrewed a little bit before. We got one of those Cooper's extract kits, and it was just, really not, we didn't make good beer. But when I came back from Europe, I was thinking, that homebrew thing we tried, I think knowing what I know now about beer, I could probably do that better, now that I understand what good beer tastes like and how it's all supposed to, so I kind of took that experience in Europe and came back to the US, but I still hadn't really had many IPAs yet or anything like that. It wasn't so much of an American approach. It was more like grounded in European stuff. I also went to Prague and drank a lot of Czech beers at the time. So I was like really into like some of the, the stuff that was coming out of there at the time. So came back, got, a little bit more into home brewing, kind of developed that. And then, by the time I finished college in 2009, I think I was like, this is what I want to do. I went to Washington, D.C. and did the UC-DC program. I was a poli-sci major. And I think that was the time where I realized that wasn't what I was meant to do. I wasn't going to get in the political world.
Yeah.
So I met a brewer while I was over there who was an assistant brewer at one of the brew pubs in the Washington area. And, just kind of asked him, hey, what's it like being a brewer, working in a brewery and everything? And he was just like, oh yeah, I love it, blah, blah, blah. And I'd been doing some more homebrew batches at the time and thinking to myself, I think I could really do this. So I kind of researched what are the best ways to get into this? How would one do it? And thought, well, okay, I'll probably go to brewing school. That seems like the best way to do it. I was still in college at the time thinking, what's another couple months? I can do one of these programs like UC Davis or Siebel or American Brewers Guild. So I was trying to figure that out. I had a little internship at a brewery in Santa Barbara back at the time where I was just kind of helping out with packaging and cleaning and whatnot. And it was just enough for me to say, yeah, I think I could do this. I like this, So I ended up going to Siebel the year after and just homebrewed a ton. And luckily my dad was game because I was living with my parents after college before I was saving up money to go to brewing school.
Right.
And I told my dad, hey, you should homebrew with me. So, he kind of got into it too. And that became a really fun thing for us to do while I was still living with him. And so, yeah, basically, it's funny because like homebrewing, I got really into homebrewing, but it was always with the like goal in mind that like, I'm going to be a professional brewer. That's what I want to do. So I never had like a tricked out homebrew setup or anything like that. Cause I just thought, I'm not gonna spend a ton of money on this. I'm just going to go work at a brewery. I just need to like prove that I can do all the fundamentals, So in retrospect, I kind of like, I wish I would have made better beer if I'd invested in better equipment, but it is what it is. And, that was a long time ago. So yeah, I went to brewing. You would have
followed that same arc that so many have, and you would have spent all this money on homebrew equipment that you then once got into that professional realm wouldn't touch again.
Yeah. And, I was 24 at the time when I was kind of in this phase and didn't have any money and was basically, I went back, I got a full-time job. I actually worked for California State Parks for a year, saving up money to go to Siebel, waiting until I could get into the class I got accepted to. Sure. And so it was like, I couldn't spend too much money on homebrew stuff. Sure. It was like just, so I was doing like everything I could, short of investing in like a really fancy setup.
It's so funny. Homebrewing is such an American pathway into this, that, especially if you, like in a way, yours is a more European mode where brewing is a profession in the same way that, and so if you are interested in pursuing it, you can go to university and it's a track that you can pursue, and you can intern and then you can an apprentice and you can also, learn technical kind of university and then come out and work for large scale breweries. And so it's not something that's necessarily driven by like, I love to make this in my garage and now I want to make it at this other scale. It's very much driven by that. And it was hilarious at our very first brewers retreat that we did up in Devil's Thumb in 2015. Stephen Powell's from Boulevard brewmaster, came and he had never brewed on a homebrew system before. Never ever done that. He came out of the university and studied brewing and went to a 30 hectoliter system, and I've just been at that scale ever since. And so, that's very normal for, in that kind of world of brewing. It's not that normal in the United States for us in our typical arc to get there.
Yeah, no, it does feel a little weird. You hear so many stories, other brewers, how they all do it, and everyone that I've worked with at Firestone over the years, it's all a little bit similar, but everyone has their own kind of unique way.
Sure.
So yeah. And then after brewing school, going to Chicago at the time was great. It was 2010 and, just kind of seeing some of the Midwest scene, what was going on there, drinking a ton of Three Floyds, Metropolitan. I mean, there weren't nearly as many brewers back then though. Sure. So it was really quite a different scene in Chicago. It's, I'd love to go back. I've actually haven't been back since, which is really unfortunate, but, so yeah, just applied for places. I knew I wanted to stay in California and was, going around looking at a few things and just a few months later, basically got the interview at Firestone. And I was kind of like almost just completely overwhelmed by the scale of everything too, and I remember just walking in and thinking like, wow, this is so serious. Like everything, it's like, it's big.
And the scale then is not what the scale is now.
No, I mean, that's the funny part of all that is that to me was just like, I was like, wow, this is the biggest I can imagine a brewery being that's like not Anheuser-Busch, I landed the job.
That was like three brew houses ago for the Paso brew house.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was our 50 barrel JV Northwest, old 4-vessel kind of gravity tower system, which is a really cool brew house, but really nerve wracking to run because it wasn't very automated. And we were running like 3 batches at a time through the brew house. It was pretty crazy. Trying to learn that in the beginning was very, very overwhelming.
So basically your professional career has been brewing for Firestone Walker.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, like I said that, I had that little internship before, but didn't get a real job there. So yeah, basically that was it.
So they didn't have to retrain the bad habits out of you then. They just got to train you from the start. Yeah.
I mean, I think that must have been Matt's plan at the time, was saying, okay, I just want, if I can find good kids to pull out of Siebel that haven't been corrupted yet, that's the way to do it. So,
corrupted.
Yeah.
You can imprint on them the Matt Brynildson way to do things. Hey, I mean, it's smart. And so you've worked on both the hot side and cold side then for Firestone Walker. At what point did you come down here to the Propagator brew house? Because this here in LA is a later addition to the overall Firestone family.
Yeah, we opened here in 2016, and at the time I was the cellar manager in Paso, and I guess I moved up to that in 2016 as we were opening this. And before that, I've been a QC brewer, so I oversaw yeast propagation handling. Basically, the brewery. Not too long after I started, got to the point where it needed one brewer who was like the person in charge of what's going on with the yeast, because if you're handling multiple strains around the brewery, you got to make sure you got good yeast all the time. So, you need somebody to focus on that. And then, that's not necessarily a full-time job just doing that. So you would do other stuff. So I was, helping to train the new brewers kind of as like a shift lead and doing some of the barrel stuff. So I took over barrel coordination before it turned into the program it is now under Eric. It was a little more basic. So that was just kind of a part-time thing. So then I was cellar manager for a while. And just kind of, got to see a lot of the biggest phases of growth with the new stuff we have now. I mean, obviously we continue to push it, but in 2019 ended up moving down here, and this ended up working out really well for us because my wife really wanted to move to LA, and this spot opened up, and it was just an easy transition to come down. And and I had been focusing on scale for a while and really just trying to dial that in, and we were that's such a big part of what we've been doing is been on a big growth trajectory over the years. But it was nice to be able to change a little bit and come back to the small scale and start focusing on some other aspects that I hadn't had to, think about so much in a while, like just new ingredients, pulling in things that we wouldn't necessarily give a go in the main brewery or anything like that. So that was a couple years ago. And so, the last couple of years has been, just this continuous development of just new things all the time. And it's been quite an interesting ride.
Years ago, I think maybe that was 2017, 2018. I'd popped out to Paso and was invited to the anniversary blending that year. Typically every year you invite one media member. And so that was the year. And I remember eating dinner that night with David Walker, and he made some comment about how if he could, he would just get Matt together with a 10-barrel brew house and have him focus on nothing but R&D. Like that would be the most, utility for Firestone Walker if they could just do that. And of course, Matt can't give up control of the entire thing. Like, that of course that innovation piece is super important, but also making sure that kind of quality, reverberates throughout the business is just something that he won't ever give up. But I think that spoke to an interesting value, that the business places on that idea that innovation was increasingly important in this world of craft brewing, and that for even a company the scale of Firestone Walker, being on that edge and being able to actively, focus on innovation and creating new things and staying on top of the rapid pace at which things are developing was incredibly important for the business. And so one of the things I want to talk about as we go forward is how, you engage in that kind of creative process. Before we do that, a brewery might have 99 problems, but your fruit supplier shouldn't be one. Old Orchard is already known for high quality concentrates, but they also pride themselves on consistent product and reliable supply. When brewers need assistance, Old Orchard is just an email, phone call, or even a text away. Based in Greater Grand Rapids, Michigan, better known as Beer City, USA, Old Orchard is core to the brewing community. To join their fruit family or learn more at www.oldorchard.com/brewer. Also, are you ready to brew like a pro? ProBrew has the equipment, systems, and technology to take your brewery production to the next level. Check out www.probrew.com for ProCarb inline carbonation technology, ProFill rotary filling and seaming can fillers, the Alchemator inline alcohol separation system, 7 to 50 barrel brew houses, and more. ProBrew offers the craft beer industry innovative solutions to help you brew like a pro. Go to www.probrew.com for more info. So let's talk a little bit about what that quote unquote innovation, we use that word. I mean, it's thrown around as a buzzword in brewing like crazy. And of course, that means everything from how do you make synthetically flavored hard seltzer to, how can you focus on hazy IPAs and fruited and sour and everything else. And so putting the buzzword aside, there's a creative process, in Firestone Walker. Talk to me a little bit about how that creative process works.
Well, a big part of it, I think, is just kind of exploring and figuring out what we like and, looking out at the world of craft beer and saying, what's inspiring us? What do we think is something worth going after? And then just trying it out and going from there. A lot of things obviously are, in your wheelhouse, like, you're going to make another IPA,
Sure. So
that's something that you're constantly working on, is saying, what's the next IPA, and never giving up on that. And I think, as long as IPAs are driving a big part of the craft conversation, that's going to be a big part of it. And then also pulling in other elements, that, exploring other things, like, when we would get into wine hybrid beers for a while, quick sour beers, things like that. So you kind of go down these different rabbit holes, and some of them lead to full-time brands that end up coming out. Some don't. They don't necessarily go anywhere, but you just kind of have to figure that out. So, usually every year we're getting together, and this is starting, 1-2 years out. You're looking ahead and saying, okay, what's going to be coming up and what do we want to start working on? And so, like I said before, sometimes, maybe for an IPA, it doesn't take as long because you have an idea of what you're going to do, and you can execute, and you just need to find a new way of playing with some hops that you want to get just perfect. But maybe it's a beer like Mine Haze, where for us, when we started into that, yes, it's an IPA, but it's a completely different approach, right? So sometimes you just have to relearn or recombine skills in a way that you haven't before. And you just, I think for us, we have a certain like quality standard that's our kind of guiding principle, saying if we're going to do something, this is how we're going to approach it. And we're not going to, I guess we're not going to compromise some things just because like, oh, people are like, do that, do it this way, do it this way. And we're trying to think, okay, well, what's the way we want to get in on this and do it in a way that makes the beer we want to make and is how we make beer. And I think everybody has that, obviously. But, some of the things I'm thinking of here, obviously I could do, but they wouldn't necessarily scale. And that's something you always have to keep in mind, in that, if we're going to release a beer out of the, main production brewery, it has to hit certain standards as far as like what kind of beer we can do, even though as time goes on, that does evolve. You get more comfortable with things. Having tools like a flash pasteurizer help, things like that, as far as like you bringing in new ingredients, utilizing ingredients in ways that you may not have before, because of shelf stability issues, things like that. But generally, these conversations are happening, starting a couple years in advance. And then, and then it's a back and forth with marketing to figure out, what are we comfortable bringing to market? What kinds of new things do we want to do? And then just trying things out. And then on the other side is also just bringing in new ingredients and seeing how they inspire you. And sometimes it's just, like the Hellas that we have on right now, it's just pulling in a new malt and saying, we just want to check that out, see how it goes. And then, you might learn something from that you just didn't think about before, and it leads you in a different direction. So I think it's just being open to new ideas and open to trying new things, and then constantly learning from it.
Certainly hops as an ingredient are a big key inspiration, piece. Talk to me a little bit about how you, Matt, other members of the brewing team kind of approach that and find inspiration, for some of these hoppy beers. Certainly creating an endless new iterations of hoppy beers is somewhat consumers want, but making sure that they're interesting, that they're inspired, and that that they are accomplishing something that makes them feel like Firestone Walker is another piece of it. So, walk me through like how you all go through that evolutionary process of evaluating hops and developing new hops blends, and then finding the right kind of place for those things.
Yeah, I think we're in a little bit of a unique position because Matt has so much time flying around the world, getting into this in ways that few brewers do. We were just talking about the Order of the Hop honor that he's going to receive next year in Prague, and that's the beer.
In fact, I was just drinking that beer that you all are canning tomorrow here at the Propagator.
Yeah, collaboration with the Yakima chief.
Yeah,
one of their employees, Pete, that was down here for this brew, is also getting that. So we're really excited to get together and brew that. But yeah, part of that's, he's been working for so many years at that, doing educational stuff for Hop Growers of America. And, he's really, that's put him in a unique position, I think. And
sure.
So, but then we also have a team that goes to Yakima every year. And, whether it's for hop selection or our work with the hop quality group has also been really important over the last few years. Firestone was one of the founding members of the hop quality group. And that's really, just getting together with other brewers regularly, just our meetings with them, and just kind of, staying up on what's going on in the world of hops and what are we going to do to improve things, and how can we keep working with the hop industry to, work on development and work on quality. And so that's just a conversation that's continuously ongoing and has been for years. So I actually, for Hop Quality Group, this was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I went on my first farm visit up to the Pacific Northwest to Yakima, first time I'd ever been there. And just, going up there and meeting the farmers, talking to everybody, and just like, I think that relationship has been great and has benefited everybody so much in the industry, whether it's, the members of Hop Quality Group, craft beer at large, the hop growing industry for sure. I think, it's very mutually beneficial to have closer relationships. And so, when you're having those conversations and you have those relationships, you're constantly talking about, what's in the pipeline, what's coming next. And you see things coming out because, it's developing hops takes a long time.
Sure.
So,
sure.
We pretty much everything that's going to become realistic, it's already there right now. We see it and we're just kind of waiting for it, And
I imagine if you're someone like Matt or friends of Matt and whatnot, then you're seeing some of the new things when they're a couple of vines out there on the farm before they're even a full row, and watching those kinds of things grow and develop as they come.
Yeah. And some of the stuff going on with the public breeding program right now, hop quality group's a little more involved with, and, the Brewers Association as well. And, I think just kind of getting out there and saying, here's what we want to see out of hops coming forward. Here's the kind of things we want. And then just, working with the breeders and the growers to make it happen. We've been really into some of the new stuff that's come out in recent years. I was mentioning Talus before, and Talus is one of those varieties that, early on we were really into and sponsored some acreage and started using it a little earlier. So there's definitely you just have to constantly go up there. Every year I go up for hop harvest,
sure.
And you're tasting trial beers at the different farms and the brokers and kind of, they're kind of showing you their latest thing and showing you how they're envisioning it. But, you've got to take it back to the brewery and use it yourself and really see how it works for you. Because, depending on how you approach IPA brewing, you're going to get different things out of the hops, whether it's how you dry hop, the yeast strains you're using, your approach to malt builds, things like that. So you never really know. You can taste something that you think is like, oh, I don't know about that. I think there's some hops came across, I just think back to the first time I saw cashmere. And I was like, oh, okay. I think I remember rubbing it. We got a sample in the brewery and we were all like, oh, that could be nice. I don't know, and then we kind of forgot about it for a year or two kind of thing. And then, you get kind of a second look at it. And I think, this is about when we were starting to get into to hazy stuff and we were looking for some new hops. And we saw cashmere again. And, and I don't know, I think the hop had changed, number one, as hops scale and growers figure out picking windows, they're going to dial in a profile the way, that, and the brewers have to get them feedback to and say, hey, maybe this was a little early or this was a little late, or maybe your approach to drying could change. And so you start having that conversation. As you have that conversation, you figure it out over time. So it takes both sides. We absolutely love cashmere now, and it's something that we're putting in multiple beers at this point. So
I hadn't even thought about that, for a hop grower, determining what is the ideal picking window for these hops, given what these, conditions are, they are constantly with more developed crops measuring, the development of oils and various components of those hops against what their expected standard is so that they know. But and then they can harvest them when they hit that kind of ideal window. But of course, when you're talking about something new, figuring out what that is, when the certain flavor components are hitting that point. I mean, there's a kind of hedonic, sensory kind of component to that. Well, like, where do I like this the most? But then it starts developing, some of these other later harvest characters that are a little more overwhelming and starts becoming oniony, grassy, those pieces that I may not want as much out of. I mean, that's an interesting kind of piece of that whole hop development process to figure out when you take it off the vine.
Yeah. And brewers aren't going to agree on that either. Everyone has their own approach. And I think, some brewers just like, more late character, some like more early character, a variety like Simcoe. I know people love to talk about just like, when's the perfect day, did they like their Simcoe pick this day, because, it'll continue to change. And I think, we have
just like why no one else is ever going to make Pliny the Elder, because no one else has early harvest CTZ. Like, good luck,
Exactly.
No one else is going to have a farm picket in that window. And so it is what it is. But evaluating what those are going to do in the brew house for you is something, is where that kind of process comes back and, has to hit a more kind of methodical approach. Talk to me about as how you all take some of these varieties as they're developing, and put them to work to understand how, in your context, that they may work for you all.
We have a couple layers of how we try out new hops. And, obviously the first is, even before that is just, assessment in the field, assessment on the table during selection, hey, check this out, okay, maybe we'll do that next year. Then getting samples sent to the brewery. And we have some 1-barrel fermenters that we use up in Paso where we'll just divert off, whether it's, some of our main beers like Mine Haze or, Union Jack or Luponic usually. And then you can dry hop those with single varieties. And so we have a pretty robust program doing that where we're just getting really quick looks at, hey, what are we getting out of this hop just from aromatic impact? And so that's useful because we can get a lot of work done pretty fast. And, here, this is the pilot brewery, but we're still making 20 barrels of beer at a time usually.
Sure.
We can't make 10, we can do half batches, but, here's really a variety that we know we like already, that we know is like, here's something we want to explore. Then let's figure out, we kind of had like two different streams. Do we want to do more of a hazy style beer, or do we want to do West Coast style beer? And then, try to hop out in that. So then that's kind of the next step up. And then you get to put it in front of people too. So those beers we make for R&D up there, it's, they're not sold. It's all just internal.
Sure.
But here we're making beer that we're actually putting in front of
one
people.
barrel is too small for anyone to bother trying to sell it at Firestone Walker. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It gets tapped in the lab, tasted, and then, probably sent down the drain at that point, unless it's a really good one. So here we're putting the beer in front of people, and we're kind of getting, it's also valuable too, because you're getting more impressions of it, even from the brewing side. So, we can tap a beer here, have it on tap for, a month. And then the beer that we brew here also gets served at our pubs, at the main brewery in Paso, and then also at the Bear Works pub in Buellton. So we got 3 different locations. We're getting a lot of people drinking these beers. And then also all the brewers are going in and drinking them too. So if you're having a shift pint of a beer, it may take a few pints, and then you're like, that hop it's kind of growing on me, or it's doing something it wasn't doing maybe in a lab setting where I had a 2-ounce sample, in the sensory lab. And, that's really good for weeding out things that are really weird. But for really finding something that you're going to fall in love with, sometimes it takes a little more time. You need to really get to know it. So there's also that layer to it. And then the stuff that we really like out of that program, we ramp up for seasonal release in our 2 mix packs. So, we'll do 1 canned beer and 1 bottled beer every time we rotate through the different mix pack. And so you're getting a different one. And that's a good chance to get in front of people and say, hey, how does the market at large think about this? And it's a lot of fun to kind of see the reactions there. So kind of all the way through the scale, and those beers, those are our Propagator series beers in the mix packs, but they're actually brewed at the main brewery, but it's just a continuation of the single hop series we're doing here.
That's really interesting. I think time is the other thing that you get to evaluate when you start brewing it on a 20 barrel system, and those kinds of things, because, the way that hops continue to express themselves in beer does change over time. And that's a component to this that you may not get out of a small 1 barrel sample that gets tasted and evaluated quickly in a lab.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some hops age better than others, or just change in interesting ways. And you never really know what you're going to get. Yeah.
How do you, then start building the blend ideas? You've now tested out some stuff here, and you have some constants that you hold consistent, so that you can understand the effects that these things kind of have. But that's always been a fascinating thing. And blending hops has become such a big piece of the Firestone Walker kind of strategy. Obviously, the Luponic Distortion series is known for that. And even in the world of Mind Haze, you all are starting to play in that with different hops blends and different kinds of approaches to Mind Haze, taking that kind of base brand and extending it in varying directions. Talk to me about that, how you all go about building blends.
Well, Mind Haze has definitely given us a lot of data to look at, so I look back on the Mind Haze page in our dry hop file now, and it's amazing how many different hop combinations that we've been able to try with that. And each time, we develop that, it takes a couple of test batches to kind of work out. But usually we're working with hops, we're rubbing the hops, we know what we're getting into, and then we're making up the blends, and then developing that. And so we've seen what a lot of different hops do together over time, over the years that we've been making that beer. And pretty much, at this point, I don't know what we haven't put in. We've, other than like hops that just aren't really IPA hops at all, like traditional noble or, English varieties that just don't work well in IPAs. But pretty much every new American thing that's come along, or Southern Hemisphere, whether it's, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, they've all gone into Mind Haze at some point. And we found a way to make them all work. So yeah, you learn a lot from doing that over time.
And this isn't like, Galaxy dry hopped Mind Haze. This is, you have, within the context of what people expect Mind Haze to be, tried different hop variations within that.
Oh, sorry. I meant Luponic Distortion for those.
Luponic Distortion.
Yeah, sorry, I misspoke that. Yeah. So, the Luponic Distortion series. That's what we're going over. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Mind Haze, there have been a couple tweaks along the way of Mind Haze, over the different harvests. and so even within brands that we try to keep a consistent flavor profile for, obviously that recipe does change over time as the ingredients change. Everything, from Union Jack through to Mine Haze now, it's a subtle process of continuous evolution as the hops change, as even as malt quality changes throughout the years, or as tastes subtly change over the years, there will be very small tweaks in that direction. But
yes, I love that. It's something I've been talking about for years and years and years here on the podcast, that sometimes you have to change to stay the same.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely the case in beer, that most of those recipes, classic recipes and classic brands that we know, even Budweiser, my goodness, the Anheuser-Busch, folks change that beer all the time because, all that matters, doesn't matter what the recipe is. All that matters is that the focus groups perceive something now based on how that they're tasting these things as the way that beer is. And so, all of our sensory inputs are being constantly, bombarded by different things, whether it's the latest drink at Starbucks or just how sweet Starbucks makes their lattes. Who knows what it could be, what fast food, trends start to kind of feed into that. But all of these pieces impact our palates and in varying kinds of ways. And so, you're right, for something to be perceived the same kind of way, it can't necessarily just be static. Actually has to be dynamic in order to kind of maintain that consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as consumer expectations evolve, you're just trying to keep up. I think, if you try to keep a recipe the same over a 10-year period, barring some more traditional beers, perhaps, I think you would end up realizing that, wow, this is not what I'm expecting at this point, because everyone else has changed so much. And I think especially the IPA game has changed so much in the last 10 years. I look back at, when we did put out Luponic Distortion for the first time, that was actually after we had already become aware of New England trends and what was kind of happening there. And we were kind of like taking some steps in that direction, where we were like, okay, we're going to make a filtered West Coast IPA, but we're going to get close to that flavor profile because, we have Union Jack. That's our classic West Coast IPA that we've been making for a few years now. So let's try something a little different. Let's lower the bitterness. Let's pull out the crystal. So we got a lighter color, a little bit lower ABV, dry it out a little bit, and then just go for this bigger, juicier hop profile. And, but it was clear. And then it's funny, I remember sending somebody a picture of like a post-dry hop sample before we were filtering it. And I said, here's our new IPA. That's, back when everybody was joking about hazy beer.
Sure. It's so lazy. It's so lazy.
Yeah, what are we doing? But, and it's fine. And then, people like freaking out about it, but no, and then eventually, a couple years later, you kind of find out that, well, no, there is something to the haze and the approach that's fundamentally different. And then kind of going down that rabbit hole and figuring that out. And that took us a long time here and a lot of test batches to do. But that's kind of another road, I guess.
Boy, that sounds like something we should talk about. But before we do that, your beer deserves all your attention. Clarion makes that a little easier. Their food-grade lubricants will help keep your system running smooth while also safeguarding your product from costly contamination and recall, because then you'll be in full compliance with food safety standards. And it's all thanks to a simple switch to Clarion, a food-safe system that lets you focus on your craft. We'll drink to that. Go to clarionlubricants.com to learn more. So yeah, talk to me about this.
So when we started down that road, I think the first thing we needed to figure out was,
because I love the idea that the format and malt and general mouthfeel and residual sweetness and all of these other pieces could actually change the way that you approach, and the kind of fundamentals and the way that you even think about some of these other ingredients.
Yeah, it was kind of relearning everything and recombining everything that we kind of knew about beer in a new way. And I think the fundamental breakthrough, at least that Matt kind of communicated to the team at the time, was, we brew a great Bavarian style hefeweizen. And so, what if we can take everything we know about that and make an IPA, learning some of those lessons about how the appearance of that beer is key to the flavor of that beer. If you drink in a Crystal Weizen, you know that it's not the same beer. And so I think we had to accept that because, at the time I remember there was a lot of back and forth between, you can make a clear beer that tastes like a hazy beer or whatever. And I think we came to the conclusion that like you really can't. There's a fundamental difference there, and part of it is the appearance of the body and a fundamentally different way in which haze carries hop components that a clear beer can't. So with that in mind, you kind of set out and say, okay, so how are you going to build it? And just pull together the different ingredients you're going to use. We tried out different yeast strains, different combinations of wheat and oats, pretty much everything you could think of before we kind of settled on the approach that we use now. And that did involve bringing in a new yeast strain. And, for a while, so the Firestone House yeast is a relatively estery English yeast strain. And, and so at the time I was thinking,
naturally everyone's trying to figure out a way to make this work so you can use the same yeast, right?
I was like, we're going to use the same yeast. We're going to use it. Because why not? I was like looking at the, people that were using London 3 or Conan or, some of the other stuff like even Sactois where they're like, oh, it's more ester forward. And, for most of the brewers in California are using something like Cal Ale. Generally, not everyone. Actually, there's a lot more that don't than you might think. But, I felt like we were already there yeast wise, we already have a big ester yeast. But it turns out that a shelf stable haze and a more stable profile was difficult specifically with our house yeast. It flocculates really hard and beers would clear up a little bit more. You just wouldn't quite get, and the ester profile was maybe not exactly what we were envisioning. So we pulled in some other yeast and we ended up settling on a different strain, which kind of gave us everything we wanted, out of that new flavor profile.
Is it London Ale 3?
It's related.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and it's just,
we're not breaking new ground there. We're not,
no, I know, but,
lighting the world on fire.
Yeah. And I think so learning to use that was something that I think was like, pulling another yeast strain in is a little bit just different enough that you're relearning it, but it's also very similar to our house yeast. So it was familiar enough that I think we were very comfortable with it right off the bat. But we did have to kind of adjust some of the ways in which we dry hopped because of flocculation characteristics and things like that. And then, really reapproaching hops and saying, okay, we want to develop a completely different hop profile and then coming up with a blend to do that. And so we ended up with a pretty big blend of hops of mostly the newest varieties that were on the table, to be honest, with bringing in a couple ones from a little bit further in the past to kind of round it out. But, like I said, that's changed a little bit over the years. We've actually ended up adding in one or two more over time, to keep consistency up, as things have changed. But yeah, we just kind of ended up getting to the finish line there after, just banging out batch after batch after batch. And, starting with the same base recipe, trying different yeasts, things like that. And then serving those, I think the first time we did 3 different yeasts, put all those beers on the tap at the same time. And just like, we actually did a whole like customer survey where we were like, hey, everybody tell us what you think of these, fill out the sheet. And we were kind of having fun with it that way. And then once we then we're like, okay, then we kind of found the yeast we were most comfortable with there. And then, we kind of went from there and continued to tweak it. But and we still continue to as well. I think I still brew a lot of different hazy IPAs down here, and part of that is just to try out, like new hops, how they work within a bigger base beer, how different alcohol strengths work with the yeast, and how that brings out ester profiles. Using different things like malted oats was a big one that we had played around with a little bit back in the earlier kind of Mine Haze phase. But I was approached by another supplier more recently that was doing some malted oats now. And I was like, okay, let's give them a try again. And we made some really interesting beers this year with them. And it's an ingredient that I really fell in love with. So there's always something new.
Malted oats. Why malted oats?
Well, the thing we found out about malted oats is that you get a lot of the quality of flaked oat, but it lauders a lot better. I was actually laudering these big hazy IPAs in about the same time as a Pilsner, which we never used to be able to do. So you're able to use more. So you don't kind of limit yourself to this, okay, here's my maximum oat I can add, and then everything's going to get stuck on me. So we were tripling, quadrupling that amount and getting this really saturated oat flavor in a way that you wouldn't otherwise get. Really great haze stability and just like this really luscious mouthfeel. So that was a lot of fun.
When I was talking to Steve Luke at Cloudburst a few months ago, he's moved to malted wheat and oats, but it was for stability for reasons. So it's kind of interesting getting to the same place, but for another reason. Talk to me a little bit about impact of ABV on hops expression. That seems like a interesting thing that you played around with here.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to our house yeast and how being a more ester forward yeast, how that expression changes over different gravity ranges. So if you'll take our West Coast range going from Easy Jack Session IPA, kind of stopping at Luponic, which is about 6% alcohol, up to Union Jack at 7%, and then Double Jack, which we brought back as a seasonal, or our big double IPA last year, but we don't have it all the time anymore. That's 9.5%. So you see how that affects the flavor of the hops over time, and you kind of find that kind of like breaking point where the ester really starts to make itself known. And that's a big part of hazy IPAs, right?
Ester breaking point, huh?
Yeah, it's like, with the lower beers, it's just, ester content scales pretty closely with original gravity. So, if you want to increase the ester content of the beer, raise the gravity. So, in a beer like Double Jack, you're getting a ton of that profile. And that's why I think, a beer like that's like very quintessentially Firestone, because it really displays our ester profile. But even beers, depending on the beer, like a beer like 805 displays a lot of our house ale character. But people don't think about it as much because it's a lighter beer, and but it's not fighting with the hops. So for hoppy beers, something like Luponic, that's in that sweet spot where we're getting just enough ester that it rounds things out, and we tend, our yeast is a little more banana forward, a little bit of like ethyl butyrate, some kind of like, pineapple mango-y thing, but not a ton, not as much as like 1 and 3. And so, that's why Luponic, that gravity we kind of chose, for various reasons, but that kind of middle sweet spot of like, it's an IPA, but it's a little bit on the small side for an IPA, especially a West Coast IPA. And that allowed us to let the hops kind of take center stage there. And then Union Jack is like this ultimate combo of like, that's just to the point where our yeast is really saying, hey, like, this is a Firestone beer. This is our yeast character. And then here's this classic West Coast hop profile, featuring a ton of Simcoe and, Chinook, Centennial, Cascade, Amarillo, and really like, getting those classic varieties in there and then letting them kind of have a dialogue with the yeast and making it a unique beer. And I always thought that that's what, we've used some cow ale over the years for some contract brewing, not necessarily for Firestone beers, even though we did a tiny bit. And yeah, it's the beers are very different, I think. So that's always set us apart a little bit.
Talk to me a little bit, as we were discussing before we started the podcast, you've got a whole new line extensions around Mind Haze coming out, some that involve fruit and other types of variations on, using this kind of Mind Haze idea to extend it into other directions. But one of the fascinating things you mentioned to me was that it's not the same base beer for each of these, that in a lot of ways you are now tailoring even the base recipe around what additional the contributions of various other ingredients or what those might provide to these beers. Talk to me a little bit about that process, because that seems like something that's rife for a whole series of other challenges that cascade out from it as you start changing those pieces.
Yeah, definitely.
It certainly makes it much more complex than just, hey, we're going to, take this tank of Mind Haze and add such and such to it.
Yeah. We didn't just start on the road of, okay, we're just going to take the same recipe and then we're going to keep, adding new things to it and making new beers. So they're all a slightly different approach. And that kind of started a while back here down at the Propagator when we were thinking about making a wit beer. And we were kind of inspired by Blue Moon, which, it's funny, you probably don't hear a ton of craft brewers admitting that, but inspired by this idea that, well, okay, so, they kind of famously...
Blue Moon sells a heck of a lot of beer.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing to be...
And they famously don't use a Belgian yeast strain for it. They use an English strain for it. So we were thinking, well, okay, what is a hazy IPA? And the approach to hazy IPA that we take with Mind Haze, using oats, using unmalted wheat, using malted wheat... when you look at it on paper, you say, well, what's the difference between this and a wit beer? They're almost the exact same malt recipe when it comes down to it. So we thought, well, we can kind of go down that road. So we started adding, spices and orange peels. And then, that turned into using fruit purees and kind of like seeing where that would take us. And so through that, we kind of found our way back into Mind Haze by adding hops back to it and saying, okay, so now we're kind of making this weird hybrid English, Belgian, American kind of approach to how this beer could be constructed. And so now, so it turned into these different flavor profiles. So the two that we were doing right now is one of them's coconut, and that was just we just love coconut. I don't know. So many people love coconut. We love
just
coconut.
Use Sabro. I mean, why did you just use Sabro?
Well, and then we add a little Sabro to it too.
Okay.
You gotta play the Sabro off the coconut.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Even though Sabro is just too polarizing on its own, I think.
Yeah.
I remember the first time we did a single hop Sabro beer, I fell in love with it actually, and then we added it to other beers, and it's funny. It's almost like it's one of those hops where it's almost all or nothing. It can be great just dominating a recipe, but a lot of people, if you have it in this like weird kind of in between zone, a lot of people don't like it. But if you use it to kind of amplify coconut flavor, then it's a very useful hop.
What's your amplify percentage? We use like 5 or 10% of Sabro, but then at 25 to 50, it's terrible. And then at 100, it's great again.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah. About 10, maybe 10, 15.
Yeah.
And so, and we were actually making one, and this is one before I moved down here. The last head brewer here, Evan, before he moved on, he made this little beer called Jugosito. And it was just this hazy pale ale with coconut, and just people loved it. And so I brewed. Actually, it was one of the first beers he brewed. The last one when I moved down here, it was sitting in tank, and I was like, I remember coming in and going, hey, where'd you get the coconut? We never used coconut before, and I think he had ordered it through the company that they order for the kitchen, and he just got flaked coconut from the food supplier. And so we actually went out. This is a good opportunity. We had just done a collaboration with another brewery down here that uses some coconut, and we were like, hey, where do you get your coconut from? So we found another coconut supplier, and we had done some different stuff. And actually, I should say, Eric did one coconut in barrels before, but the thing he did, he toasted it over one of those like Santa Maria charcoal or wood grills, which Central Coast is famous for making tri-tip with. And he was toasting the coconut with that, and I was like, I don't think this is really a viable method to process coconut for us, especially on a larger scale. So we kind of like, so then we tried it in the kitchen, toasting it there. And then luckily we were able to move on. So we found a supplier that we could get pre-toasted from because we really like the toasted character.
Yeah.
So we found a great supplier on the Central Coast, actually, a local company that did that for us. So, we did coconut double mine haze last year and really liked that. So we kind of developed that. So a little bit of a spin on that, but more in the mine haze range and just tailoring the dry hop to really work really well with that, with the coconut character. And I think it just makes a really cool beer.
Now, extraction with coconuts, it's an interesting challenge. And I would imagine that on something like a double mined haze, that with that little bit of extra alcohol that might be in there, might actually aid extraction a little bit more than on a smaller beer. Brewing with coconut on that kind of scale has to be kind of a pain in the butt for a brewery like Firestone Walker.
It definitely is. It's a ton of work. Basically it takes basically one brewer full time almost to do it. And, we have an extraction tank that we got a few years ago that's really helped us kind of move on with some of these new ingredients. And a lot of it was our seasonal stout. We were doing coffee and chocolate version of it. And then we did a coconut version of that. And before we, started doing coconut IPA on a larger scale. And so, you load up the tank, you sandy the whole system, purge it out, and then just pump it in a loop with the tank. And before that, that really helped us because before we were dumping coffee, we were going up to the top of 200 barrel tanks with just bags and bags of coffee from a local roaster and dumping them in the top of the tank. So it was nice to be able to not have to do that.
Yeah.
And then the cocoa, we were hanging in another tank. It was pretty crazy. We would be hanging like hundreds of pounds off of like a chain off the manway of this one tank. And we had our different methods of doing it, but having an extractor tank has been really nice because it's just, one closed loop setup. You just have to be really meticulous about purging it and making sure you're not introducing any oxygen in the process. But yeah, coconut, it just takes so much coconut, pounds and pounds per barrel. So it's quite an involved process, but it's just, for people who like coconut, it's just such a delicious flavor.
And it's all still real coconut, real shit.
Yeah, this is all just toasted, shredded coconut. Yeah.
So it's not extracted coconut extract or coconut flavoring.
No, coconut, it's something we tried to see what it was like, and we just can't. Yeah, you need the real coconut. Yeah.
You've got fruit flavors on the horizon also coming out on the Mind Haze side. talk to me a little bit about, again, building a recipe that supports that kind of piece, both on the hop side and, if there are any malt considerations.
Yeah, I think one of the things, like I said, the kind of that road we started going down, trying to kind of fuse witbier and seeing where that would take us. With fruit, especially because it's a low bitterness beer, so you can add fruits with some acidity and it's not going to get in the way. And I think that the problem we always had with trying to do fruit IPAs in the past, and whenever we trialed them, was most people don't like acidity and bitterness in combination. So you have to be really careful about that. And, if you take a base IPA recipe and then you add fruit in a way that lowers the pH significantly, it tends to turn a lot of people off, and just, it's not a smooth flavor profile. The bitterness becomes harsh. So by then,
just the perception of hops bitterness, it's amazing. You can try it at different kinds of pH levels. Like, people perceive the quality of that bitterness and, and flavor in drastically different ways. And it's such it's so impacted, by that experience of pH.
Yeah. So being really mindful of that effect. And then coming back, after having Haze become, a beer that we were very comfortable with, we could come back and add fruit to different, basically a base beer, Haze, and say, okay, what's this doing to it? So we really, we found a tangerine supply that's grown in Central California, where we can get, it's picked and then pureed and frozen. So we can use it all year round, but you're getting this really great, kind of fresh tangerine flavor. That's, we're so lucky in Central California because we have so much great fruit grown really close to us. If you drive out into the Central Valley, east of Paso, you get to basically like Citrus Central. The kind of eastern side of the valley there is just, every, like, all the cuties and the halos and all of those little fruits, it's all grown in that area. So, being able to find a local supply, that was really key. Same thing when we developed, lime for cerveza, working with these local companies to get the fruit. So tangerine worked really well for us. We also tried mango. That was one that, kind of led us in a slightly different direction because it does work. The aroma works really well for hops, but, mango is a very different kind of fruit. Obviously a tangerine is much more acidic. So that's what we're going with right now.
Mango is much more phenolic and, has a potential like plasticky kind of, flavors that most people don't find as pleasant.
Takes a lot of mango to punch through too.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, I think, to get like that really pungent aroma out of just mango. And so, but
there's also fermentables that come with, a fruit like, tangerine, right? The juice is going to add some sugar, which, is going to get fermented out. How do you adjust that? Because you're certainly trying to keep things in a certain ABV range then.
Yeah. And so initially, we were adding this all as kind of like a secondary fermentation. And, that's can work depending on the fruit. It doesn't work for every fruit, especially depending on the base beer. But with tangerine, it works pretty well. So we had a lot of success actually fermenting the tangerine through, but also not fermenting it, and just depending on the amount you add, and like I said, that's where we're able to be comfortable with some fruit additions like that at a certain scale because of the the QC and having a flash pasteurizer and stuff like that. It's something that I think we.
So you can use some unrefermented fruit just because that there's no viable yeast left.
Yeah, at a certain scale. Yeah. It's but always being kind of mindful of like, if something does go wrong, what are your limits? And because having exploding
packages
is just something that we don't ever want to risk.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. But then, and then recombining that, and bringing the hop element back too is something that, then you have to find a way to make that play. So it's been a fun process.
Yeah. How do you make that hop element play in that kind of citrus realm?
Well, yeah, like I said, it's really about like having a really smooth bitterness, and so how are you bringing the aroma? And then, luckily, Haze, that's something we've been developing for a while. Is it's very much as a hazy IPA. It's that style where it's very low bitterness, very rounded mouthfeel. It doesn't really have the bite. It's not some of the stuff I brew down here now is we're trying to push a little bit more in the other direction, where it's almost like kind of West Coast haze style, where we're bringing in more bitterness. We're trying to make it a little cleaner, maybe a little less estery. But with Haze, that's, that was our first shot of like saying, we're going with this, like this style where we want it to be a super juicy beer, and that's what it's all about. And so it turns out that it works really well. And that all it takes is basically just maybe a little massaging of the hops one way or another, depending on how you think the aroma works off of it. And luckily citrus, naturally plays well,
Sure.
It's not too difficult to find one that works.
Talk to me about some of the fun experimental IPAs that are just Propagator products right now. And obviously I've had stuff like Gen 1, and we were drinking the hazy Order of the Hop, special commemorative beer that you just produced. But you mentioned being able to, in this kind of context, push, ideas like more aggressive bitterness that may not make it out into a broader commercial release. Talk to me about some of the more interesting things that you've learned through pushing some of these other elements in that kind of hazy IPA sphere here at the Propagator.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much room to explore, and I think I've been more interested in what. I guess with every new hop variety that comes around, you kind of think, okay, how am I going to combine this with something I already like, and what's it going to do for me? And so I think a lot of it is just kind of like trying to take everything that we can get and just making it work. And we've been doing that for such a long time too. And then part of it's just like the subtle tweaking of the base beers and saying, okay, am I going to drive a little higher finishing gravity or lower finishing gravity? How are we going to do the dry hopping? Multiple additions versus single additions, and just trying everything we can really think of for the most part. Even bringing in different yeasts. I think, a kind of different approach we developed not too long after I came down here was this beer, Welcome to LA. And it's a lager, but it's been this kind of evolution of making a lager that's like an IPA. We kind of, maybe a couple times we called it an IPL, but, we kind of came back to just calling it a hoppy lager. But, I think that
that's right, because this area, is known for these, heavily hopped pilsners and, and of course, you've got Firestone alums like Kevin Davey, a Wayfinder, making things like cold IPA. I mean, this broader family, whether it's your local friends here or whether it's this, extended alumni network, they've got their hands all over this kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I got to shout out to Highland Park, because Timbo Pills was kind of a revelation when we first had it, because we'd been brewing Welcome to LA for a little bit here, and then they wanted GABF with that, and I had also entered. I think it was the second or third batch of Welcome to LA. We entered into GABF too, and I hadn't had Timbo yet, and then they got that, and then I was like, okay, what are they doing here? And I think because lager's kind of a state of mind. In some ways, where it's like, well, what is a lager? And if I'm going to make, so my first conception of it was like, okay, make it like a German kind of style, use all new German hops and then see how that plays. And then, then I looked at what they were doing. It's like, oh, well, they're going like very classic West Coast approach, with like Mosaic, et cetera. And we'd actually done that on the first batch, but then thought we did like the Holy Trinity, Simcoe, Citra, Mosaic. And then it just kind of evolved from there. We tried it with Australian hops. We went really galaxy heavy and everything. So we're just kind of finding our way, and being inspired by everybody around us that was doing this interesting stuff. And I really think there's an interesting.
I remember having that Highland Park, one of their pilsners, which was a Nelson Sauvin hopped pilsner, and I remember having it at the Firestone Walker Invitational a couple of years ago, and going back for another pour of it and thinking, where did this come from? And how does this beer exist? And, it was one of those things that was kind of eye opening to see that this could even be a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, once, and there's something that I learned from Kevin, was that, sulfur, and I think his whole thing with cold IPA, the thing he was trying to get across to everybody was that, sulfur doesn't play well with American hops. There's a limit there. There's something going on, and you have to get that under control. And that the big hang up with a lot of India Pale Lager was too much sulfur, and how that didn't work. So basically dialing things in to kind of control that, I think, was really useful.
How do you control sulfur?
Well, mostly, yeast strain, but if you're going to use the same, different lager yeast produce different sulfur. And then, speed of fermentation too, depending on how much you pitch or oxygenation. But, a big one is just temperature, is just getting the end warm. You get rid of a lot of sulfur if you let it warm up at the end more aggressively than we would in the past. Whereas with a traditional lager profile, we want to keep more sulfur in. So for something like Evo, that's, we're going for that kind of classic German profile, or I guess classic Italian profile, you might say.
Is there such thing as a classic Italian lager profile? Anyway, that's a whole nother rabbit hole of an argument.
Oh yeah. But we have this, kind of like more
Sure.
traditional lager kind of approach to it. But then, and that works really well because with the German hops we're using there, they play really well together, and that's just a classic flavor profile. But then you start adding in some more dank American hops, and this is something that we keep coming back to, is that dankness and sulfur have this kind of amplifying effect that becomes uncomfortable. And so we're always saying, they're a little too dank, or, maybe, so the first approach was keep the lager fermentation profile, work on massaging the hop blend in a way to control the sulfur, and really kind of picking out, so like we would make a mosaic heavy hoppy lager and say, well, that's not really working. And then, what are we going to do about it? But then it turns out that, well, no, you can use mosaic. You just have to control the sulfur on the other side. So yeah, so basically
just
mostly warm
diacetyl
stress. Yeah, a little more, depending on the yeast you're using, something like 3470 is comfortable fermenting all the way up to 20 Celsius. Which is people have proven, in various ways with, analysis and all that. I think Fermentis did a really interesting study that we saw. Actually, somebody from Fermentis presented it at the California MBAA meeting we hosted a few years ago at Firestone, where they had just done the study talking about how they could ferment it warm, and basically, analytically and sensorily, like people couldn't tell. And, obviously that's like one data point, one study, and it doesn't apply to everyone's breweries and how they make beer necessarily. But it just, it allows you to get a little more comfortable with it, I think, and say, hey, you can do this. It's going to be okay. If you're kind of, because I think with lager, we think of it as you have to approach it a certain way, So, but yeah, so there's kind of
we're bringing it full circle into busting lager myths here, and I love it. We brought it right back in.
Yeah, but just like to kind of round out IPA before that, I'll just say that it's I think we're trying to find, like, I don't know, we made a couple wine hybrid IPAs last year, which I really liked because that was a really Paso thing. And we'd been fermenting wine must a bit, especially with a rosé beer we developed before that, which we don't make anymore. Turns out the world wasn't ready. But in an IPA, I think it could be really nice. And I think, other, breweries like the brewery right down here in Orange County, have done a lot of wine hybrids like that. Maybe not so much in the IPA realm. But
listeners will need to listen in a couple weeks, because we have a conversation coming up with Jeremy Grinke from the brewery Taru about wine beer hybrids. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Oh yeah, I mean, we being in wine country, I think a lot of breweries in California, it's just a natural tie-in, and it's really fun to do.
I mean, you've got to go in both ways, because we have Nick Gislason of Screaming Eagle and Hanabi Lager Company, who went from wine to making beer, and now we've got folks that like Patrick Roux, the founder of the brewery, who now has a winery in Napa, and it goes both directions, and I love watching that dynamic and that kind of conversation back and forth between those, because it feels natural, because wine is everywhere here. People love it as a beverage. They love the agricultural roots. It's something to be connected to in the same way that you all can stay connected to the fruit. I mean, it is the same. It is obviously, it is a fruit. It is a fermentable fruit. And, in the same way of building products that are relevant, for your business, because they're so connected, wine grapes provide a natural element to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's such a limiting, difficult fruit to work with, I think, on scale for a lot of people. So there's just going to be a natural kind of limit to how popular that is. But, it's kind of like, well, I guess fresh hop is getting easier, but I was going to say it's like the Northwest breweries, how they can just drive to the hop field,
right,
throw the hops in the back of the truck, and then go brew with it. And
they can freeze the hops for you now. You don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, maybe with wine hybrid stuff, it's just the next, it's just figuring out a way to stabilize that a little bit better. So, you can more easily work with it.
Yeah. It's, there's a lot of blue sky out there for folks to figure out. And, of course, I think that's the real challenge. Like, how do you make those compelling beverages that are somehow better than either of their component parts? That's the problem that brewers are still trying to figure out. Can we make it? Or would this be a better wine and a better beer separate and apart? I don't, the number of solutions, the number of beers that I've tasted, the wine beer hybrids that have truly pulled it together, and I thought, oh, this is better than those components. It's pretty small, but at the same time, we're half a decade into this, maybe 7 years, 8 years at the most. Like, wine's got to hundreds and hundreds of, thousands of years of development to get where it is now. And so as we keep following that and tracking that, I'm curious to see where it gets to. From a broader kind of innovative, perspective, what's exciting you the most on your brewing side right now? What are you learning and really challenging yourself with?
Learning new ways of handling with hops and yeast and seeing how those, how the combination of yeast and hops in different ways, and, kind of generally touching on the, the kind of like hybrid of like, making hoppier lagers or making different sorts of IPAs. It's like, some of the stuff like, what's going on with like Berkeley Yeast and Omega Yeast Labs doing some of their, genetically engineered stuff where they're just completely different approaches, and then learning how to reuse that stuff. So that's something we're kind of excited to get into. We're kind of like, we haven't really gone into it yet, but that's a road I want to keep looking down. But also, with stuff like cryo, we've been a little bit late to the game, but with the batches that we have done with it, it's, going back several years now, a little bit here and there, but just kind of, reapproaching, saying, okay, how can you use hops in a slightly different way? And how does this change how you can hit the flavor profile you want, using hops in a certain way, just because they're different. And that's something we also did, and not just, Yakima Chief, I think, is doing a great job with cryo, and the other hop companies are kind of doing similar stuff right now. But that's something with European hops that we've done for a bit is basically, your more classic like T45, getting the alpha up on some of these lower alpha hops, like something like, Calista or Melon, which, in that format, boosting the alpha a little bit, you might, be able to get a little bit more concentration out of it, especially if you're shipping hops from Europe. But how removing some of the plant material allows you to approach it a little bit differently, because, what you're getting out of hops, there's a whole spectrum of things you're getting out of hops, right? And part of it is, are things that you don't want necessarily.
Sure.
Some of the more stringent aspects, hopper and things like that. And so there's something definitely going on there, that you can approach things differently. But yeah, that's really a big one for us, because I think as time goes on, IPA is not going anywhere. So I think that's where a lot of our focus remains. But also, on the other side is just, on, the lighter side, what's the next, like obviously 805 is, for us, has been this unique beer in that it's kind of like, it's carved out a niche in the craft market that not too many brewers have.
Sure.
And, finding maybe, where can that go? And that's definitely a different approach than, the hop game. But it's, what kinds of like more approachable beers connect with people, and what's the next one of those, so we, kind of tentatively, we did our second 805 extension, which is a Mexican style lager brewed with lime. Sure. And that, and same thing again, figuring out, okay, how are you going to use lime, and, how do you, integrate that into the process? So every new thing along the way is just like, just one little new thing. But over time, like I said, especially, it's like adding a new hop into every new Laponic rotation. But, in the end, you look back and you've used 50 different hop varieties, and you've learned a lot about them along the way.
Well, Sam, I think that's a great place to bring this to a close. I appreciate you talking with me about brewing today. G&D Chillers knows that good enough just won't cut it. Sativa is ideal for aroma, whirlpool, and dry hop additions to hazy and juicy IPAs. Try fruit juice concentrates from Old Orchard. Pro Brew has the equipment, systems, and technology. Take your brewery production to the next level and make your system 100% food safe with Clarion lubricants. Of course, if you'd like to support this podcast, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on the subscribe button, and if you're a pro brewer, consider our new all-access subscriptions. Of course, if you are a subscriber to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, you can pop back in the archives available to you on the website and in the app, and go read that June-July story that Sam wrote on busting lager myths right there in the magazine. Because that is one of those benefits that comes with subscriptions. You can access our entire back library of content through all of our digital means. It's pretty cool. Again, if you are coming out to CBC, hopefully we will see you on Thursday, September 9th, 3 to 5 p.m. at Bierstadt Lager House. Sam, if people want to learn more about Firestone Walker, people can find Firestone Walker, but the Propagator in particular, this brew house that you call home here in Venice, California, where do they find Propagator and the Propagator beers that you make?
Well, we're very close to LAX. And so if you're ever flying in or out of LA, I think you should be our first or last stop on your trip. And
it was my first stop, flying right into LAX and right over here. 13 minutes, I think, from the rental car place to right here.
Yeah, right up from the beach, right up from the Venice Boardwalk. So come on by. You can keep up with what's on tap on our website, firestonebeer.com. Just click on the Propagator section and you can see what we're doing.
Thanks for joining me. It's been great to talk.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, cheers. This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.